Hey, Canzano here. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe to this channel if you want more videos. Before I get into Oregon and Oregon State and talking about college football, I have to deal with the presidential debate. 80 million people watched that. Only 8 million watched Monday Night Football. It was the lowest viewership for Monday Night Football in history of Monday Night Football. But before I get into the college football, Mike Leach, Washington State coach, joined me on the radio show this week, and he broke down the job of being president and, frankly, what he thought of the debates.
I thought it was actually kind of a warm-up round. I thought they were both a little constrained. I think two things. I think Hillary's trying to look aggressive. I think Trump's trying to look, deferential, presidential, whatever you want to call it. Basically, Trump's trying to look like, he's a gentleman with good manners, and Hillary's trying to look like she's an aggressive pit bull. I think more parts will fly in the next two. I think it'll be worth watching, whether someone likes politics or not. I think, and I know it sounds odd, I don't believe in the entertainment television that takes place before or after.
Yeah.
But I do think there is kind of a limited responsibility to watch, if you're American and everything like that, or at least read about it to try to, keep up on who you're going to vote for.
Would you want that job?
The hardest thing about that job is getting that job. I think the hardest thing is getting that job. Would I want that job? Well, it's like anybody. I mean, it's like my job. Everybody sitting at home thinks they want my job. And that's also a job like my job that everybody thinks they know how to do that job better than the guy that has it. Would I want that job? Yeah, I think I would. Now, my suspicion is if you threw some pixie dust my direction and I got it, I'd wish I didn't after about a month. But after I checked out all the stuff, did the museums, flew the airplane, ran around Camp David, went you could have all kinds of cool tours, Washington and stuff like that. I mean, heck, you could even do a JFK mischief tour, like this is the room where,
Yeah.
And, and I mean, but then I think there's a point to where, it's a very serious business and you have to actually solve some problems and know how to solve some problems. And I think that's the other thing that's bothering everyone is they're looking for both sides to work together on their behalf rather than this just evolve into political fantasy football teams. I want this team. You have that team. I want your team destroyed no matter what, even though, when you're talking about the country, it's the other team's weak. It's the demise of everybody,
All right, really tough week of college football, a tough college football Saturday for Oregon and Oregon State. And I thought about this as I was driving down the I-5, cutting through the Beaver traffic, cutting through the Duck traffic, that here are two, this was a college football Saturday that this state shared, and I thought it was a big college football Saturday with Oregon State playing Boise State at home, and Oregon in a game at home against Colorado. There was an important get-back-on-the-horse game. Obviously, both programs lost, and it was a tough day, but it got me thinking about something. When was the last time both Oregon and Oregon State lost on the same day playing at home? Do you know the answer to that? I do, and I'll give it to you in just a moment here. But first, let's talk about Oregon State's game against Boise State. I was tempted to not include them in this video until the halfway point because they didn't show up until halftime against Boise State. But let's start off the video with Oregon State just to be fair here. Oregon State didn't play a complete game. Showed up at halftime, played a quarterback in Connor Blunt who hadn't taken a snap under center, and felt pretty good about the second half of football that it played against Boise State. But again, that was not a football game. That was a football half game that Oregon State played. And they played against a team that showed up for warm-ups, came out in the opening quarter and ran Statue of Liberty, double reverse pass, trick plays, kept Oregon State's defense guessing. Boise State outclassed Oregon State playing at Racer Stadium. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. What was a surprise to me is that a college football team that has talked about playing tough and hard and complete football games, only showed up to play a half a football game. That is concerning. I was relatively pleased that Gary Anderson came out on Monday and said, look, I'm going to stop talking about how tough we should be and how strong we should be, because those are things at this point of my arc here as coach in Game 15, those are things that we should no longer be talking about. They should be assumed. So I was pleased to see that. They now go to Colorado on Saturday, and I think the one hope that Oregon State has to have is they know they have to bring their A game. Watching Colorado, how good they were, especially those wide receivers at Colorado, they were so good against Oregon. They have to go to Boulder with their best effort and their best punch, and maybe Gary Anderson gets that focus out of the gate because of that. Keep an eye on that. Further, I talked and walked with some of the Colorado players as they left Autzen Stadium's field on Saturday. They were ecstatic. They were hugging each other. There were tears. There were glassy eyes. There was all this talk about, hey, this was finally a validating conference win. And it struck me that there's a little bit of bulletin board material there for Oregon State to seize upon, including Bryce Bobo, who told me afterward, look, beating Oregon State last year, that was great, but this was a quality win. So keep an eye on that. See if Oregon State seizes upon that. Also for Colorado, I think emotionally they were so sky high at Autzen Stadium. And beating Oregon, even though this Oregon program is down right now, but beating Oregon at Autzen Stadium, that means something. Ask Utah from last year. Ask Washington State from last season. This was a big landmark win for Colorado. Now they go back home, and human emotion, do they have a letdown against Oregon State? I'll be curious to watch only one thing out of the gates there. Who shows up to play from snap one? Is Oregon State there and ready to play? Is Colorado, which played with a lot of alacrity and intensity and urgency against Oregon, do they have that same urgency against Oregon State? Keep an eye on that, and keep an eye on Connor Blunt, who I expect is going to play in this football game. Gary Anderson, I think, has found himself a second quarterback. And you can say there's no controversy all you want, Gary, but when you have a backup quarterback who comes in relief in the second half and an offense that just was going nowhere in the first half, and that backup quarterback moves the ball and you get points, you got a controversy. Meanwhile, at Oregon, Mark Helfrich is doing some soul searching, and I know this is a team that is 6 points away from being 4-0, but if the Ducks were 4-0 at this point, I think they'd have the same problems that they have at 2-2. Let's be real. This is a very flawed football team, a team that tried to cover up a lot of mistakes with an offense that can be dangerous at times. Dakota Prukop made a bad situational throw at the end of the game against Colorado. It cost his team, but there were so many mistakes, so many errors, so much blame to pass around that I was not surprised that the Oregon Ducks held a players-only meeting on Sunday night in which they talked about things, and on Monday was a players-only meeting on the field. Look, those players-only meetings are great. It allows the team to kind of sit around and talk without coaches being present. But I imagine that discussion, if it was being honest, is a lot like, hey, you're not very good, and you over there, you got to make some plays. You're not making plays. That defense has no playmakers on it. All the playmakers on that Ducks team are on the offensive side of the ball, and they're a little boring and a little predictable on the offensive side of the ball. I think it's a really bad combination. I was thinking about Charles Nelson during the Oregon Ducks' loss to Colorado. They moved him over to the offensive side of the ball exclusively. He's a guy who bounced back and forth. Wouldn't be surprised at some point of this season to see Charles Nelson revisit the defensive side of the ball. He's about one of the only guys on that team that I trust can make a play on defense. There's no Eric Armstead. There's no DeForest Buckner. There's no TJ Ward or Ifo Ekprealomu or Casey Matthews or Kiko Alonso. You could go on and on and on with all these great players who play defense at Oregon. Haloti Ngata, Igor Olshansky, Dion Jordan. There's been some great playmakers on those defenses. Even when the defenses weren't that good, they had some guys who could make plays. Right now, that's just absent at Oregon, and it's killing them. So what is that about? I think it's about coaching. It's not just about recruiting, because it looks like they've missed on some recruiting classes, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But it's really about getting your guys in position to be successful. And if Charles Nelson was plucked from the defensive side of the ball to offense because, man, he's such a dynamic offensive player, maybe you think about putting him back on defense. Maybe you think about putting some playmakers back on that defense. Mark Helfrich, his seat is getting a little bit warm. I'm not among the crowd that says Helfrich must go or you got to fire him. He's had too much success. He's 2-2. You just gave him a 5-year, $17.5 million extension, so you're pretty invested in him. Mark Helfrich gets this season to figure this out. Now, if it goes like I think it's going to go, I think they're going to be somewhere around 7-5 or 6-6. 8 games to play. I could see them splitting those 4-4 or 5-3 or 3-5 even. Mark Helfrich gets this season, finishes this season with a warm seat, goes into next season really having to prove himself. I think the rest of this season and next season becomes vital for Mark Helfrich's survival at Oregon. But what does he need? He needs to bring in better players, and then he needs to develop better players. It bothered me at the end of the football game that all eyes were on Dakota Prukop, a graduate transfer who comes in like Vernon Adams, and everybody's looking at Prukop saying, save us, save this football game, do what Vernon Adams did last year, and make a play here to make all the rest of this not matter. That bothers me. Develop your own guys, recruit better players. Mark Helfrich, this is on you. All right, my trivia question. When was the last time that Oregon and Oregon State lost on the same home Saturday? Try September the 29th, 2007. Same day, same commute, same lousy commute. You have to go back to 2007. That's a whole long time, and I hope we're never there again.